So, hello and welcome to this segment in our intro course on if statements. So, I'm going to go through a little bit what if statements are and what this course module is about, what you should do. So, if we look at this little graphic that we have in the course that I prepared, this is one way to look at if statements. You have some kind of condition, and depending on if that condition is true or false, so it's a Boolean condition, right? Can only be two values. We execute a code block or we don't. That's the basic premise of if statements. So how do they look? Well, we have this course available in all different languages, but one typical way to write it is if and then some condition here. And then we have a block, which can be different. If it's many languages, it's these kind of markers to show where the block is, where it starts and ends. So that can be one way. In Python, we would put just colon and then use indentation to denote the block. But this would be the typical look of it. So we have some kind of condition, which is a Boolean statement. And in other place in the course, you will find a Boolean module. So that has to do with this condition that I drew there. So here is a Boolean statement. And yeah, in that part of the course, we can look at that. You can look at that more carefully. If it's true, then this block gets executed. Then we are going here, we execute the block. If the condition is false, then it's skipped. So then we just go straight through doing the next part of the code, which is down here. So whatever goes down here will be executed if the condition is false. And why do we have these? Well, I guess you could argue that without if statements, then the code would run the same way every time you run it. So this is the way we have to actually condition the code and say that if you have asked to, if you have a valid login, then log in the user. If the login is not valid, then don't log the user in. Or maybe you want to just show a message if a number is too high, over 100. So then if number over 100, user message would be the code block. So all those kind of things that give you different paths through the code, then if statements would be used. So if we continue, we can look at this example here. So here we continue on level 2 with else statements. So else statements is what you see here. So we still recognize the first part here. There is a condition. If it's true, we execute code block. Here we have another option that we have a code block that only gets executed if the condition is false, which is different from before, because then whatever was after the code block was always executed. So now with an else block, we can say that this is what we should do if the condition is not met. And if we look at the graph, we see that we get to the condition. If it's true, we have a code block, then continue. If the condition is false, we continue with a code block, and then no matter what happened, we continue running further down the code after that. So now we introduce the else block here. That is our level 2. And if we switch then to the editor here we are at level 1, and here it's about checking the largest value of two numbers. And there is an example here on how to do that. So the condition would then be, if A is greater than B, return A. And then since return is only executed once, and then the code block is left, then the return B would not be executed if A is greater than B. But then in the other case, when B is not true, then we would return B here, down here. So that is what you should do. So in this video, I will not actually run the code that you will have to do. I should also mention that now my editor is set on Java here, but the course works in any language. So if I switch to Python, we would see that now we have this colon that I mentioned and an indentation for the code block. So you will get the example which is for the language that you have chosen up here. But I will go through what you should do, and then I will leave it to you, the viewer, to actually carry out the exercise. Going to level 2, we get the flow part. If we close that, we see that now we have the example that I showed, and here we should return the smallest number between A and B. So it's a similar check to before, but now we just put the return statement in an else clause, because we should only return B if B is the smaller number. So there's also this logical graph here showing the condition and what we should do if true, what we should do if the condition is false. Then we return A, and if false, we return B. So, okay, going back to this view here. Here is the example that returns A if A is the smallest number, or otherwise B if B is the smaller, or in case they are equal, actually. Also B is returned. So let's continue on. Here is an example of what you might see when you run level 2. So you should return the smallest number. So in this case here, A is 60 and B is 74. And if we follow the green arrows, or the bold arrows, then we get the condition A less than B. It's not, so, or sorry, it is, so it's true. So we continue with the bold arrow down here, and we return A. And that is also what we return, and it's also the correct result. So then we pass the level. So this is essentially what you should do in level 2 of the core of this module. Continuing on, we get to the next level, which is about nested if statements. So this is when we have something like, if we look at the graph, we have a first condition here, which can be either true or false. If it's true, then we have a code block to run, possibly, and then another condition in the nested if statement. So here, if that one is true, we will run yet another code block. And if it's false, then we go back to the main flow of the code. So this is basically putting, if you have an if statement here, so we call this condition A, and then we have an inner block here, where we have a second condition, B. And then there we would have yet another level. So this code block that we have in here, block, let's say, would be this one that we see here, the inner code block. And this block of code which would go here would be the upper one here. So we have two levels or nestings of the if statements. And if we look at an example, it can look like this, a little bit more well written than my example. So if condition 1, we run this code block, and then we have yet another condition. So if both of those are true, then we'll find ourselves in here, and this code block will be executed. So that is level 3 with nested if statements. We can also say that another way to do this is to say if condition 1 and condition 2, then we run this code block. So we could use Boolean statements inside the condition. Then of course we would not have the opportunity to run this code block here. So nested if statements can be nice in this case when you have something that should be run when condition 1 is true, yet another block that should be run if both are true. So level 4 then is about multiple. This is actually an example of how to solve level 3. So here we check, we should return num if it's between 10 and 100. So then we check if num is greater than 10. In the nested statement, we check if num is less than 100. And then in that case, we return num. Otherwise, return -1. So if we go back to the editor, we can see it here in level 3. If we go to that one with the nested if statement. So here we see the same graph we just talked about. We should return a number which is between 10 and 100. And we see the same thing in this logical graph here in the canvas. So that is a good case when we want to use nested statements. And the solution that I showed just now could look like this. So we return num if it's greater than 10, but also less than 100. Otherwise, we return -1 to solve this level. And this would be a successful example of running level 3. So this example, we can see one case we have -89, then greater than 10 will be false, and we return -1, which is correct. Then we have the example of 90. So then we would get here, num is greater than 10, true. Num is less than 100, also true. So then we return num. So we return 90, which is the correct case here. And then the last case, 523, is what is marked here with the bold arrows. We come here, it's greater than 10, true. Num is less than 100. 523 is not, so false. So then we return -1. So that is what we see here. We should return -1. So that would be how the canvas can look if you solve level 3 correctly. And then in level 4, we have in level 4 we have multiple conditions. So what that means is that instead of doing nested statements, so that both this first one and the second one is true to run the code, then we can move that into a Boolean logic, Boolean statement inside the if statement here, which looks like this. So here we check if x is greater than y and x is greater than z. And if both of those are true, then we run the block that we have down here. And this one is denoting or. So I should say we have a different module for Boolean statements like this. But here we have if x is greater than y or x is greater than z. So only one has to be true. Then we run this condition here. So this is how it can look when you have a multiple conditions or a full Boolean statement as the condition. So here we say in level 4, if num is positive and less than 100, then we should return num, or otherwise we return -1. So going back to the editor, we switch to level 4. And here we see how multiple conditions are used here in the condition statement. And we see the graph where the whole logic is put here in the condition box. So num is positive and less than 100, then we return it, otherwise we return -1. That's what you should do in level 4. And if you run that, then we see how the canvas would look. So it would look like this. If we send in -16, it's not positive, so we should turn -1. That's what we do here. If we send in 64, it is positive and less than 100, so we should return it. So then we return 64, which you see here. And in the third case, we have 263. It's positive, but not less than 100, so we should return -1. So that's the correct thing to do here. So that is level 4, where we move the multiple conditions inside the full condition as a Boolean statement. And then in level 5, we go to something called ternary operator, spelled like this. So this is basically when we move the Boolean logic, move the condition or if statement inside just one line. So before we have seen multiple lines of code, but this is kind of a minified or minimized if statement that is built into just one row here in the code. So it's like a built-in if statement or built-in if function. So what we say here is that we want to select, depending on this condition, x is less than y. If that is true, the question mark here shows it's a ternary operator. Then we pick the first part of it, the x. If this is false, then we pick the y, which is after the colon. So this is one typical way to write a ternary operator in many languages. We'll go to the editor very soon, and I'll show you how it changes for Python, for example. Probably PHP also has a different way to write it, and so forth. So here we assign some value to the variable min, and we set it to either X or Y. If X is less than Y, we select X and put it in min. If X is not less than Y, then we select Y and put it in min. So yeah, basically we select the minimum value out of X and Y using a ternary operator. So let's go to the editor and pick level 5. So then it looks like this. This is showing the same logical flow that we've seen before. And here we see how it looks in Java, which I've selected right now. Let's switch to Python, for example. Then we see that it uses a different way to express the ternary operator. So here we return A if A is less than B, else B. So I guess this is a little bit more like English language, but you know, that's your pick, which one you prefer. You can check something else. PHP, it looks very much like Java. Maybe something that's usually different. This one is same. Ruby is very similar. Kotlin is similar. Let's see, Go. We didn't have right now, so that we need to fix. But this is the most common one that you will see in most languages. And that is the 5th and final level of the if statement module in the intro course. So good luck in solving this.